because last week we spoke about my chicken, and now I've lost all chickens but one, thanks to the local fox population.
I think you were particularly forgetful. You just keep dropping them off at the side of the road, like, oh, where did I put that chicken again?
No, that's what you do with your children, not with your chicken.
You realize this is on recording, Roland.
Of course,
This
of
is
course.
this is the
They're,
worst advice
they're
you've
adults
given.
now. They're adults now. They can be happy that they survived, you know?
Oh, hide your kids. Yikes, Roland Bolt.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we've met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Volt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson. Hey, JM, how you doing today?
Doing great, Roland. Thankfully dry. I always talk about the weather. I don't know why. It's affecting my life a lot because I love to go walking outside. But yesterday was a really torrential rainstorm, and I'm just thankful to be in clean, dry clothes again. Oh my goodness. I love walking around outside. Some of the most beautiful things are accessible primarily outside. And I had a couple friends in town. We were going for a wonderful walk, and the skies just opened up. And when you're partway through taking people around a beautiful, like, ancient site, and you think, "Ah, should we just go inside and you'll miss the rest of it?" And of course, they didn't want to. So, welcome to me spending an evening shivering, but finally waking up nice and cozy and warm today.
And, and
How you
given
doing,
the
man? How you
topic,
doing?
given the
Yeah.
topic of our episode today, it's a good customer service for all the people who watch us on YouTube that you're wearing clothes today. You know, so that's
Wow.
good.
Oh,
I'm impressed.
I did not know where you were going with that one, Roland, but I'm happy.
Down the gutter, as always. Down the gutter. You know.
I see. I see. Listen, we'll take the gutter and we'll also take the stars because we've got a star today on our show. Now, Roland, we talk a lot to customers. That's part of the things we do. But
Mhm.
oftentimes I feel like that's either in a sales role or in a consultative role. And there's a lot of other things that tie together an entire life cycle of experience. And that profession is a discipline itself. Like, it is its own thing, or is it? And that's a great question today for our guest, Chad Stevens. So welcome to the show, Chad, as we talk about customer success excellence today.
Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk a little bit about customer success and what that means for everybody.
A little bit more enthusiasm, Chad. You know, we know each other for quite a while, so yeah. But hey, I know you obviously since the year of the Lord, if we stick with religious topics, 2022, right, where we work together at that little software shop. But our audience doesn't know you, so Chad,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about you. You know, who are you?
Yeah, for sure.
What have you done in the past? Why are you here? You know, these type of things.
Well, why am I here? That's always the big one, right?
Uh-huh.
So I I have built my career around leading customer success and implementation teams for high growth B2B SaaS companies. In some cases BPM, in some cases other verticals entirely. I have been in both, a player coach type role. I've also managed a team of 65 across the entire customer journey post sales. So um, I have had a lot of very exceptional clients from, McDonald's and CVS and Starbucks to the Yankees and Dodgers and Madison Square Garden and JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo. And, the list goes on. I typically am joining companies to build out the customer success engines that get our clients up and running quickly, driving continuous value, through the platform. And then also focusing though on putting the right systems in place so that we can ensure that we have visibility, we have forecasting for renewals and upsells and escalations so that we can really take the entire customer success function and take it from being in a reactive mode to being more proactive, ultimately driving more value for the clients and more, value for the company as well. Um, I am currently the founder and principal of Double Win Consulting. I live outside Los Angeles, California. It's beautiful outside right now. And I live with my wife, my two kids. my French bulldog that hopefully won't interrupt us while we're talking today. And when I'm not working and parenting, I am surfing and snowboarding. So thank you so
Oh,
much for having me.
that sounds
Not
great.
bad.
I love it. That's a nice little tidy life, my friend. But we like to ask one other question beyond just the personal, which is a thing that you have on your bucket list, something you desire to do in life. Tell me a little bit,
Oh,
for all of our audience out there, what do you envision in your mind?
I hit a bucket list item last summer. I took a surf
Oh,
trip to the Maldives. It was literally the surf trip of a lifetime. Um, Lived on a boat for 2 weeks and, surfed multiple times a day. And that was one of those things that it was just a fantastic experience. Aside from that, uh, I think that there is a lot of value in just getting outside. All of us spend so much time in front of our machines, so much time
Mm,
either, even if we're looking at our phones, but we're spending so much time in front of the screens. It's really valuable to
mhm.
get outside and, get that perspective back.
Yeah. Moving away from this digital space into the meat space, as it's sometimes called, where people actually live and do stuff, and we're able to touch things. And people, the old phrase "touch grass" as a
God,
almost like a quip to say get off the internet. But
I do
grass
not
is great.
understand, JM. I do not understand. Is there an AI for that? I do not understand. But
AI
Roland, here's the thing.
isn't going to go
I
outside
know
for you.
Roland. Yeah, Roland, actually, you do spend a lot of time outside. You've got the dogs, you've got the sort of property that is bordering on a lot of very rural areas. Like you also love this. So let's
mm,
all three of us pass on our love for the outdoors to our loving audience. But let's actually shift to the other thing that our audience wants to hear, which is more on the topic for today. So we've teed this up a little bit, Chad, but tell us a little bit more about the concept of customer success, the whole discipline of customer success. Why does it exist? Define some of the key terms that we're going to be using today that you can take forward as a context for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing about customer success is that if you ask, three different people, what is customer success, you're bound to get 7 or 8 different answers. And that is one of those challenges with really defining what it is. When I'm
Yeah.
talking with a new organization, one of the first things I always want to do is make sure that we have a definition for customer success that works with the organization, with the company that we're working on. um, at the end of the day, it needs to focus on driving value for clients. And that is the most holistic way of really looking at it. Sometimes people will say, oh, it's all about renewals. It's all about managing renewals, or it's all about, onboarding or implementation or account management and making sure that we're relationship focused and we're talking with the clients on a regular basis and QBRs or the voice of the customer, all these different elements that can come into play and support. Support oftentimes is misconstrued as customer success and vice versa. At the end of the day, though, it comes down to driving value for clients. If clients are able to drive value through your platform, renewals become a foregone conclusion. The implementation process, the onboarding process is easier if you focus on the value that you're ultimately getting from the platform. So, that's where my definition, very high level, very holistically for customer success is how are we driving value for the client and ultimately also for the company.
mhm. Um, Obviously, we could go into each of those, and I guess we will, each of those areas that you just put into your definition. But I like to bring that back a little bit to our audience, the practitioners in BPM groups, in architecture groups,
Right.
because I think the only exposure that they have with the customer success guys is as part of their software license deals and license renewals, and in
Yeah.
many cases after the fact and not proactively at the beginning of the relationship. So, what is your experience or your opinion on how things are and how things should be?
Mhm. So a couple of things. One, speaking to the audience really here, customer success as a concept is really in any project, any transformation that you're doing. Oftentimes, it's a function. It doesn't have to be a particular role or a particular person. I've had some organizations where customer success is owned by everyone. Well, that's where it gets kind of dicey, because then, if it's something is owned by everyone, then is it really owned by anyone? Those are kind of some of those questions that come along. Um, but you're right. Oftentimes, the interaction is with the vendor's customer success team, and there are individuals involved, right? And so there are different ways that you're going to be interacted with from a customer success standpoint. Um, for a lot of our audience, the typical customer success manager that they're thinking of is going to be a high touch interaction where they're meeting with their customer success manager on a very regular basis, and it's a very clear and strong personal relationship that is also built. In other cases, though, it's a more digital customer success motion. And so in those cases, you're talking about really interacting and doing things at scale. Just because it's at scale does not mean it's any less valuable. And the key there is to really be able to ensure we're driving value, as I'll continue to probably repeat over and over again.
Yeah, I think you got better experiences than I had, with these creatures, because what I've seen is,
Wow.
yeah, I don't know, it's a wrong word, but anyway, so
Yeah.
with these people, I've seen a lot of people who don't know the software, right?
Mhm.
And then because they don't know, they are the glorified calendar regulars. Oh,
Yeah.
shikes, I need to have that monthly call with my customer. The customer doesn't fill out our success strategy document, and I don't want to bother them, but then they have some
Yeah.
questions around, how do I do this in the tool? And I don't know how to do this, and yada, yada, yada. So they basically fall into a role where they organize things. And I think that's wrong, right? So
It's
how do you
It's
become
valuable,
better?
Roland. Like, remember, these organizations
Mm,
are sometimes disjointed on how they do implementations, making sure they have the right pieces. We talked last week about
mhm.
compliance. It's the same idea, right? I think of this sometimes as like a project compliance or like an implementation compliance support. But I think you bring up a really good point here, which Chad, I think a lot of technology vendors, and I'm sure you fight this fight all the time, see compliance, or sorry, see customer success as a channel of additional communication for their sales teams. So like, oh yeah, if we can have additional touches, this is free touches. And that doesn't add any value. That just adds more sales
right.
touches to a sales cycle. Does it actually result in better outcomes for the customer? I mean,
That's really the question there. And when I look at it in terms of a QBR, or quarterly business review, an executive business review, any regular cadence meeting that you're having, the worst QBRs I've ever sat through were 60, 80, 100 slides, and it was a sales exec just trying to slam through the new updated platform, and just trying to essentially demo without doing a demo. um, the that in itself is, I mean, it's bad in and of itself, but what really is the real crux of it is that in that QBR, the client, it's not about the client, right? And a positive interaction for your client is going to be, it's going to be about their problems, it's going to be about their challenges, and how our solution is helping to you know answer their problems. The other piece of it, though, when we start talking about QBRs and regular cadence meetings and how we're engaging with the clients, uh, if we take it back to that, how are we having them drive value? If they're if an upsell or an expansion is going to help the customer drive more value, then it makes a ton of sense. Let's make sure we're pushing that. If you're just trying to, push a new tool out there and it's not going to drive any value, then maybe we should think twice.
Yeah, and I want to find the balance here because obviously, you know, we always think about how can you be proactive about preventing a customer from starting to churn rather than doing a bunch of
Hmm.
account recovery. I've done a bunch of account recovery. We both know it is a very challenging task. But
Yeah.
the being proactive is also bothering people out of cycle theoretically. There's a executive slash director in video games development. I really like he has a lot of thought leadership that he posts online. And one thing he says is he does not set recurring meetings. None. None of his meetings are recurring. Every at the end of every meeting, they discuss when they will next need a meeting. They come to a consensus on that. Either it's going to be, and here's date, or it's going to be, here's trigger, or we're going to leave it with you and you tell us when the next meeting is. That is, I think, a very friendly way of
That's
doing it.
an
But how
approach.
do you balance that in CS, right? How do you think about, I want to be almost prescriptive with like, I'm going to be telling you that you should
Yeah.
probably be thinking about this problem this often, but I don't want to be intruding on operations in a way that makes it feel unwelcome.
Yeah, I think that there is some value in the approach that you were just talking about. Where I would disagree. I think that having those recurring calls on the calendar, it gives some structure. It reinforces an ongoing relationship. Now, you don't always have to have those meetings, and you don't have to have them at that exact particular time. You can move them around. You can update them. You can change the format, whatever it may be, but having those checkpoints on the calendar at least uh, give us a vehicle to have the conversation so that when there is a massive escalation, we actually already have a relationship in place that we can utilize to actually solve the escalation. um, but that said, you know, you can really look at the interaction as one piece of the puzzle. And when we're talking about being proactive versus reactive, being reactive is obviously we're just waiting for a problem, we're waiting for a question. The customer is the one having to drive everything. When we're talking about being proactive, you said the word prescriptive. Both of those kind of go hand in hand. Proactive and prescriptive, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be in your face saying, hey, we have to have a meeting. We have to have a meeting. That's about me and making me feel better, and not about you driving more value through the platform. Right. So, really, if we really bring it back to the value that we want our customers to get, um, that's where we can be proactive by evaluating the metrics um, and the numbers that we see from a usage perspective. As an example, we can be proactive by going in and evaluating the NPS surveys and things like that, so that we have all of those pieces, so that we know what's going on without just crossing our fingers and waiting for somebody to come ask us or tell us.
Do you go into situations with your clients with a uh, pre-formatted assessment, or how do you do this? Because what I've seen in the past is um, customers might not understand the value proposition of the things that they buy. They might not
Right.
know how to implement it, how to use it. I remember I had 3-day workshops with customers where I tried in for the whole 3 days to get the use cases out there, right? And the customer
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, but
I
I
think I was
bought your
in one of
software.
those with
You
you.
you tell me." Yeah, well, anyway, so with angel tongues, I tried to do this and failed miserably. Um, but then so that's the first question. What do you go in? Is there a questionnaire that you take? Uh, which is obviously then
Yeah.
software specific. The second thing is what you just mentioned, all those metrics, which are obviously very customer success specific, but are not necessarily value driven, if you will. Right. Of course, we can talk about net promoter score and all those metrics that you have. They do have a
What do you
value, but
mean?
not in the sense of, hey, I buy your software and the software should
Mhm.
uh, order coffee, brew coffee, and serve coffee. And I would expect a quality metric. What's the extraction of the coffee and how long did
Sure.
it take? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the net promoter score is,
Success
yeah, would you
metrics.
recommend would you recommend this coffee machine to your best friend? Yes, no,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a different quality between it. So question is, how do you approach customers in such a situation when they might not know what they need?
Yeah, so there are a few different things that you're hitting on. The first one was around, the customer not necessarily understanding the value prop. I think there's also a
Mhm.
distinction between the buyer and the end users. Oftentimes,
Yes.
there might
Yes.
be a
Agreed.
financial buyer, an executive that understands the overarching value proposition. They're not going to be even necessarily logging into the platform.
Mhm.
Then on the flip side, you have sysadmins, you have end users, you have all these folks that actually have to do a portion of their job through the tool or platform. And so having that distinction and recognizing that the person that bought the platform is not the same as the end user, you need to be able to not just pass along the value prop that this is why you guys bought the system, but you also have to kind of translate it to some extent so that it's applicable and they understand how their usage of it impacts the overall value prop. uh, so there is some nuance there, and yes, it is platform specific to some extent, but again, it's how does what you're doing as an end user fit into the overall puzzle. From a metric standpoint, there are a couple of different pieces to look at. The first thing that you're kind of getting at were the success metrics, and ultimately, I like to look at this also from an implementation standpoint. One of the first questions that I always go in and ask a sales team member if they're handing off a new client is, okay, this fantastic. I'm really excited to work with this client. You know, why'd they buy us? Why did they purchase this platform? I can guess. I assume it's going to be one of these 3, 5 value props that we're focused on providing. But really, I want to be able to know from their perspective, what is the goal that they're trying to get uh, answered, or what is the value they're trying to get? Because what that does is that gives us that North Star. It gives us that um, that focus point to always bring things back to. So, in a project, you're going to have scope creep. You're going to have new ideas come along. And it's like, well, hold on a second. Let's make sure we focus here, and we ensure that we're still aligned to what our key objectives, our key success metrics are. Because if I bought this platform to brew coffee and the other things, he says, serve me coffee, and then Roland says, oh, but hey, I'd really like to have a cupcake with it. Well, then, hold on a
Mhm.
second.
this is a coffee machine. Let's focus on that. We can talk about the cupcakes later on.
Just to take a pause here, Chad, because I think that we're getting into the how, and I heard you say a couple of things that I think are really important. One of which is taking it from the customer's perspective. I mean, yes, you're trying to be directive in some capacity because you understand the core value proposition of what you're offering. But I always like to think about it as, when you listen to the customer, you're also hearing what they bought it for. Because when you get in the picture, you're not always one to one. Like, you've got a feature set, you've got a capability set that you go to the market with. What it's used for never exactly matches up with that, and those differences are really important in defining sort of the value wedge that the salespeople need to create for renewals or upsells, but also internally that they can create for evangelizing the use of this platform. And I think this is a really good moment to take a pause here before we get into the how, because the how is going to be really important as people are looking to build up success programs or use customer success to help drive their tool adoption and use and success and value creation. So I want to turn it back to our audience. So the audience, have you interacted with customer success managers before? Customer success as a discipline, are you a part of it? Have you been served by customer success managers as part of the implementation of a platform within your organization? And tell us a little bit about your experience. Think about your experience with this. Was this something where you felt like there was a lot of value that you were getting from those interactions? Or did it just feel like another part of a sales cycle that you could do without? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our second section, a little bit more thoughts on how to make this really come to life with customer success.
Keep me for tomorrow, 'cause today I'm fine.
Yeah, welcome back, chat. Very interesting conversation. Too bad for our listeners that they didn't hear our break conversation in between. But for that, I guess you have to go to Patreon to see the little uh, outtakes that JM posts there. But anyway, let's go back to the topic. I think we all got a good understanding about what customer success now actually means from the different angles that you said. I like to move us on a little bit to the implementation side of things. You know, how do I set this up? And I know you want to have the most complicated Louis XIV style palace implementation of everything that you do. Is that correct, or am I mistaken because we haven't seen each other in a while?
You are 100% wrong. I know I'm not the first
That wouldn't
person
be
to
the
ever tell
first
you that,
time.
but you know,
That wouldn't be
Not
the
the first
first
I
time
won't be
that
the
I'm
last
100%
either.
wrong.
You know, that actually is one of those things though that kind of it's kind of a trigger for me because in general, I think that customer success oftentimes it's over engineered, it's
Mhm.
overcomplicated. People
Yeah.
are trying to do too much with the resources that they have. And that's why I'm constantly trying to pull us back to what is actually driving value for customers. If you look at a segmentation model as a very basic example, I have talked to teams where, you know, they're trying to segment across 10, 12 different segments, whether some are vertical, some are the cost and the revenue, some are the product usage, all these different pieces. And the question that I always ask is, how is the experience going to be different for one segment from another? And if the segment experience is not going to be any different, we may not actually need to do separate segments. And that's one of those things that where we can really try to consolidate, keep things simple, or as simple as they can be. Now that said, how do we go about implementing customer success? The first key point there that oftentimes comes up is when is customer success supposed to get involved? And are they coming in pre-sales? And I'll plug your other episode that was all about pre-sales,
Thank you.
the sales consultants and such. That was Max, right? That
That
Yeah.
was
he did
talking
a
through that,
fantastic job.
and
Yeah.
it was a fantastic discussion. And one of the kickers for me in that one was when he was talking about demos and focusing on the value that the customer is actually going to get, not trying to just demo everything. And the same kind of consideration comes into when customer success should get involved in the conversation. We don't want to go throw the entire company at a prospect in the sales cycle and say, here's 15 people from our team that are all going to be doing these different things. We want to keep it simple for the customer also. However, there's also a balance there. We want to bring customer success in when we have additional value to share. So if it's something around the process of how the customer is going to be onboarding and how they're going to be starting to get value, and what we typically see if it's a phased approach or that type of thing, how are we being prescriptive? We want to be able to showcase that, and also be able to build that bridge between pre-sales and post-sales.
Yeah, I hear you very much that you need to build that bridge, and otherwise a lot of information gets lost across the channel. So obviously there's going to be an inflection point here when you're thinking at a certain point in time, it is worth it. Like, how much is it costing me with little value versus how much it is incredibly valuable, but it's already too late, right? So when you look at the phases of a sales cycle, or just generally describe to me the conditions by which you would select to include a customer success representative into the sales cycle, or into just in general the customer touch cycle, both at an initial sale and as we near a conversation around renewal sales. When do you involve
Mhm.
the customer success? I mean, obviously they're going to be in the account, but when do you bring them back into like the upsell or the cross sell or the new conversation with
Yeah.
the client?
So two very different
Yeah.
topics for me. On the one hand, for new sales, I have gone out on a limb and I've said that there is never a scenario where customer success should not be brought in at some point pre-sales. I do
At
think
some
that there's
point.
always a value.
Right.
However, where that is differs based on the client, based on the platform, based on the sales team and the sales engineer,
Sure.
all of those different pieces. I don't think you need to bring in customer success, pre-demo with a
Okay.
prospect. There's one of those things, having too many cooks in the kitchen. Um, it does happen, and so
Yeah.
that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to confuse the client with having, or the prospect in this case, with having too many people in the room. They're not clear who their point of contact is, that type of thing. When we
Right.
start to talk further, though, about the process of how we are actually going to take them from being really excited that they're about to sign on the dotted line, and then we start realizing that there is some work that has to be done by the client, by us as the vendor. Uh, and there has to be that implementation, that onboarding phase. Uh, in
Hmm.
in that conversation, oftentimes customer success can be that bridge, so that the customer knows that it isn't just a handoff where they're going to have to start over. I think we've probably all been part of one of those bad scenarios where you sign, you buy a platform, and then you're pretty much just starting over on day one of the employee. Yeah, or you're just on your own.
Yeah, I think that's what I've seen, and I've obviously been a player in those games. Is the question, who owns the customer when? Right. So obviously, when it's early in the sales cycle, the account reps will say, "Oh, it's my customer," blah blah. But then once the customer has signed and the licenses have flown, then you might have your professional services group, right? And they become the handholder, but they also typically work for money. And if a customer doesn't have budget for a project, so that ends, and then you say, oh, well, we got those customer success guys, they basically work for free. They're always here 24/7, just go to them. And then you dump all the problems to that poor soul, and that guy has no idea what has happened before, because they intentionally left him out of the conversation, because we can't trust those guys. And
Right.
yeah, stands in the dark. Have you seen that before?
So yeah, there are a couple of different pieces there too. It's, on the one hand, um, you know, in some scenarios, especially large enterprise deals, you're going to have a professional services, you're going to have an
Hmm.
implementation, you're going to have a project focused team that is taking the client and getting them up and running, whether it's paid services in the PS world, or whether it's a dedicated implementation team within customer success. You're going to have that in large enterprise scenarios, where a platform may be more out of the box. You may have a smaller implementation. It may be actually owned by the customer success manager that is going to own that account from contract signature on through perpetuity.
Hmm.
So those are two different ends of the spectrum. I don't necessarily want to say that there is a finite line where one person has to own it versus the other, but I do think that it's really important that there is a clear main point of contact at any given time for the client. I always like to use the relay race analogy, where you're holding a baton and you're running along, and I have an 8-year-old in track and field right now who's doing his relay races, and the kicker is that you can't drop that baton until the other person takes it from you. And if that analogy really does work very well for the handoffs with software and platforms. Sales team, it's not really their job post contract signature. Well, that's fine. However, you have to make sure that someone else is taking ownership of that, whether it's customer
Hmm.
Right.
success, whether it's implementation, PS. Similarly, renewals.
Yeah. Keeping customer success in the account and getting the account ready to renew or cross sell or upsell.
Mhm.
Like, Talk to me about the interaction between, as Roland mentioned, professional services, particularly account ownership
Yeah.
and account executives, whatever the pre-sales is involved in the next renewal or upsell, and customer success, who is kind of the day-to-day executive contact, as far as I see a lot.
So one way that I like to look at it, again, I've been a broken record throughout, but customer success is all about driving value within the platform, driving value for the customer.
Right.
If we're doing that, these other pieces all fit into the pie. Uh, Account executives, account managers, and renewal management as well. Uh, the account management and renewal management sometimes in smaller organizations will be the customer success manager. It can be challenging to be owning the contractual elements, the dollars and cents, and also still be that trusted advisor, or whatever term you want to use for the trusted advisor. I'm really focused on your value, but oh, by the way, I'm also trying to, increase your rate by 15%. So there is a balance there. But if we come back and we focus on the rationale and the value that the customer is getting out of it, then you can still make that work. However, it is really nice to have that separation of contract dollars and cents and trusted advisor driving value, helping strategic usage of the platform.
And that actually leads me to a question about smaller organizations, because customer success is how you build up something. I've seen a lot in like organizations that are very well established. You don't see, sub 50 person companies necessarily having somebody in customer success. And yet they're a platform vendor. So where do you see this move between other people who serve customer success roles, and tell me a little bit about them, and the establishing of an actual discipline within an organization around customer success? And I'm talking about mid-stage companies who are starting to get their feet wet in the sort of enterprise sales world, and looking at customers who are longer term, not just the one that started them, but a number of customers who need to establish a discipline. So tell me about, first and foremost, who covers before there is a real discipline, and secondly, how do you establish and maintain that real discipline inside your organization?
Yeah. So first off, I think that the sooner you can establish a customer success function, the better. Obviously I'm biased there. I also believe that onboarding is the most critical part of the customer journey. We can go down that rabbit hole if we want. The kicker though is that I actually have seen it more and more now in the space that smaller organizations, series B, series A in some cases, has that customer success function, but who's doing it is your $1 million question, right? And so in some cases early on, the default is that an account executive continues to be the account manager. They're being that trusted advisor. They're they sold it to them, and they hold on to that client so that they can continue to the land and expand and upsell and whatever. The kicker though is that if they're focused on that existing client and growing that client, they're not out there hunting new deals. They're not out there finding new prospects and working that side of the business. And so you get this imbalance of effort and what their particular goals are supposed to be. And so that's the piece where when you start to scale up, when you start to have success, that's when you really need to separate those two.
Incentives drive behavior, right? And what I've seen is, in many cases, that you tell the account reps, you go out and hunt. You get measured by only new clients, net new clients, whatever, right? I actually like the idea of building long-term relationships with your customers, right? I think that's, for everyone involved, the better setup, which obviously then would require a different form of incentivation of the account reps, because now they become a half success manager or the success manager. So what is your opinion on that workload split, if you will?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you have to have these things defined. Good fences make good neighbors,
Mhm.
to use that line, right? The kicker is that when you have a sales team that is compensated and incentivized on selling new deals, and that's where their variable comp is coming from, then you also are telling them to manage these existing clients. It's not in alignment. You need to have alignment between the comp plans, the incentive plans, and the work that folks are doing. Uh, if you expect your customer success managers to be handling renewals and upsells and expansion, well, then we need to be compensating them for those upsells and expansion and the renewals. And you need to have those pieces in alignment, or you're going to have just a disconnect, and something's going to fall through the cracks. That said, it can be different teams, it can be different people, or it can be owned by one customer success manager for this account, and they're owning the renewal and the upsell and expansion. I think that there is you just have to have the clear definition for what works for your company.
Maybe, yeah, maybe it's because in the back of my mind, and I'm also referring to the episode that we had with Max a couple of weeks ago. Um,
Yeah.
it's the depth of knowledge, right? In your scenario, you have the AEs who's incentivized just to hunt new stuff. Well, when they're coin operated, as one of my friends once said, when they're coin operated, they don't want to go into depth, right? So they go and say, "Oh, I let my SE do this," right? And then
Uh-huh.
those poor souls have to work overtime, right, to make things happen, because the AE is just looking for the next deer to shoot, if you will, right? If we stay in that hunting
Yeah.
scenario, that's not good, because then they never learn, right? There's one big vendor in our field, a process mining company, that makes it mandatory that the account reps give the first couple of demos. And I like that, because then they need to get to know the tool, right? And vice versa, right?
Mhm.
So if you have that split, the fences that you say in between, guess what? That leads to sub optimization, right? I don't care. It's somebody else's problem.
When we're talking about the good fences, good neighbors, it's primary ownership. It's being that the primary point of contact on certain things. It's a lot of times you'll have issues with an upsell, as an example, with compensation and such, where a CSM has gone out and they've identified this upsell opportunity. They've lined it up. They've talked through the whole value prop with the client. Client is all set to expand, and then they have to pass it over to an account executive to
Yeah.
handle the contracting. And in some cases, they're not compensated even a portion of it, because that is part of the account exec's comp plan. That's one of those things that it ends up driving a lot of bad issues and a lot of bad behavior within an organization, animosity and things.
Yeah, I see that like if you buy a car, right? You go to the dealership, you will have to deal with the sales guys, you have to deal with the financing guys, whatever, right? All those
Right.
maybe not so pleasant interactions, because you get the feeling you get pulled over the table, and who gets the better end of the deal. But once you roll off the lot, you will never talk with them. So when I look at the workload distribution of the car dealership, right, it's very clearly separated. You have the sales guys, they have all those unpleasant interactions with the financing thing, whatever. And then you roll off the lot.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of the life of your car, you deal with the service and parts department, right? You build a relationship with those guys, right? And you never see the sales guy again, right? And I'm wondering, in software, why do we do this differently? To me, the AE is the used car salesman, who tells you stories with the intent to sell you something, and then once you roll off the lot, he moves on to the next thing. Are the customer success people then the service department, or in my little example, or how do you see that?
So first off, the car analogy is one that we can all relate to, although it is oversimplifying and missing a couple of elements. One of the things is that stickiness is something that in SaaS and AI now and everything, stickiness is everything is getting a little less sticky from a software standpoint. It's
Mhm.
easier for companies to make a shift now than it was a decade ago. Um, and I think that's true across the board with software. That's one reason why we want to hold our teams accountable. The other thing is that there are still people involved on the customer side, right? Not to make an obvious statement there, but those people are going to remember the relationships. They're going to be moving around from one organization to another. You very well may be selling into the same person at the next company they are going to. And a lot of our our customers, they talk to each other within their own, competitive industry. And so, uh, given those elements, you do need to have more of that long-term relationship focus. That said, if the account executive's job is to be out there hunting new deals, signing new clients, driving brand new revenue, then that does need to be their focus. And that's
Right.
and you don't want to be pulling them into these other pieces of the journey, because that's not what they're focused on. Uh,
Yeah.
all of that, though, you have to have clear ownership. So if it is a customer success manager, as it probably should be ongoing, that's where you need to have clear ownership, clear accountability. And that comes with compensation, incentives, all that kind of good stuff.
And also, I mean, Chad, I think this is something that I talk about for companies, particularly smaller organizations, but even as you grow as an organization, you shan't forget this, is that a company works best when the people are doing the things for the most of their time that they are best at. So if you're a
Right,
hunter,
right.
like farming is just not going to be your strongest skill. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of organizations, particularly when they're smaller, are kind of trapped into this. Everyone has to wear multiple hats, but most of them don't fit you. You're just sort of letting them teeter on your head and hoping it doesn't fall off. And I think this, by the
Yeah.
way, Roland, to go back to your analogy of a car salesman, I don't know what dealership you go to, but one of the things that I think is special about the dealership that I got my car from is that I do receive periodic communications from them. They tell me about promotions, they tell me about events, they tell me about, like, a car community of people who are going to drive together. They remind me about service requirements. They give me like an update of the newest models that are coming out. None of these people are salespeople. This is just a person managing a communication cadence with a community of their customers. And occasionally I'll go in and occasionally I'll buy something, either a new car in case of my car starting to get older, or another feature, or a service package, or a detailing, or whatever. Like, they do other services. So that customer success does exist even in sales organizations that are focused on physical goods. But it just depends on what you're going to. I think your car dealership might not be serving
Yeah,
you.
maybe I'm just hurt from buying a new car by now 14 years ago, where the sales guy
Oh,
couldn't drive stick and had to ask
oh.
my wife to back up the Jeep into the parking spot. And I
So
thought,
Chad, it's
okay,
14 years ago. He had a
you
bad experience.
you're
He can't let
immediately
it go.
I mean,
disqualified.
that's a good point, though. Is those experiences stick with you?
They do.
Yeah.
The better analogy, we probably won't go down this one any further, but would be a fleet management scenario where
Mm,
there is an ongoing continued service, or not service, but continued contractual relationship. That might
mhm.
be a
Mhm.
better analogy for software.
Two more questions that we're going to ask you today. So it gives the people an idea. Thanks for sticking around this long. But there's two questions that I think we're going to ask you. And Roland's going to ask a big one that is hanging over your head. You've mentioned a couple of times. But I'll ask the first one before then, which is about turning the lens around. So let's say you were going to be giving advice not to a vendor, but to a customer
Mhm.
who was being served by customer success. What would you tell them to do in order to maximize the value of their interactions with their vendor through the lens and through the people who come through customer success?
Yeah, very simply, be clear. Be clear on
Mm,
what your drivers are. Be clear on what the value is that you're trying to get out of it, and also be clear on your questions and what you don't understand, or where there are gaps,
yeah.
and where you just want some help. Um, and then also, we're all human beings, and especially when I've talked with teams about the customer and support interactions. Oftentimes, we're dealing with a support team through email or through a chat or whatever it may be, and you forget it's a real person on the other side with real feelings and real interaction, real goals and
Yeah.
drivers. And so it is really important to recognize that everybody's here ultimately to drive value for the customer. And so, if you can get that alignment and you can be as clear as possible, that's going to help them help you in the end of the day.
Well, that brings me to the big elephant in the room, because the term is not for long chat, because speaking
Yeah.
of your friend with the same name, I'm just wondering how things will change in the customer success field with AI. Right? Will we all just interact with a chatbot? Will we have a robot knocking on our door? Will we be
Maybe.
monitored 24/7? How do you see this? Especially that I know that you work with AI startups these days, and I'm pretty sure you bring your ideas into their mix.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great question, and it really is the elephant in the room. When someone asks me, the question around is AI going to take our jobs? It's like, well, maybe, but in that case, is AI just going to be selling to AI, and is AI going to be buying from AI and
Maybe.
using the systems as well? And maybe, in some cases, yeah, we have agentic AI that is doing these activities and such. Um, However, there is still that human aspect to all of this. And one of the AI optimists that I recently was listening to was talking about how um, by adding additional AI to our lives in general, it's going to end up bringing back the humanity to everything. Here was a whole presentation about this. I won't go down that path too far, but I do think that there's a lot of automation that is going to continue to happen. And I do look at AI as being that next evolution of efficiency and automation. Just like when the internet revolution came about, you didn't have to go look at your Encyclopedia Britannica anymore to get an answer for something. It's just happening a lot faster now.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects of it. I'm thinking about ServiceNow, who has the little AI that summarizes the tickets. When you got a new customer rep on the phone and whatever has a call, you get a summary of the history with the customer, like, oh, called 20 times because the brake in the car doesn't work. To stick with our analogy,
Yeah.
still not fixed,
Yeah.
customers pissed, whatever, right? So I could see those, but I like to call the little helper tools, to make the life
Yeah.
easier. But what I'm talking about is there a big picture change, right? To stick with the internet example. I had, and now I'm outing myself how old I am, I had typewriting in school, right? Literally on typewriters, as an optional course. And nobody needs it, or stenography, and then people typed it on their typewriter and faxed things or send them via snail mail, and by now, well, guess what? You have now the word processing, you have emails, whatever, and the expectation changed, right? When you did that stuff in the 80s and before, you sent something with a letter, you knew it takes days until you get an answer, which might be half baked, but you were done, you could go home, mow the grass, whatever you do. With the internet, well, if I don't get an answer from JM within 30 seconds when I send him a text, I'm getting super nervous, right? So there's
Send a
different
follow-up.
expectations. And yes. And the question is, how do you see these things in the field of customer success?
The one piece is around expectations, and expectations. We all expect things more immediately than we did before. That is just the way it's been. You expect a response from JM within 30 seconds. Yeah, of course you do.
At latest.
That's the expectation now. I do think that there is a balance there, though, between the things that you can go and ask AI for, or the certain efficiencies that you can trust that it's a process that can be driven through an agent and be driven, and be trusted to be done correctly, and such. I think that, um, we are seeing where a single CSM can handle more customers than they
Mm-hmm.
did before.
Mm-hmm.
Notice I'm not saying a particular number there because it's too specific to various
I'd say
um,
20
uh,
times, 50 times.
platforms, but it's
Oh,
well,
no, no,
but
no.
it's the other piece that I've noticed, especially around the implementation of AI in customer success, is that it's allowing us to do things that we've always wanted to do for customers, like going into a regular cadence meeting, not an executive business review, but just a regular call with a client, and being able to have essentially a cheat sheet provided to you, a summary of their business, not even their usage of the platform, but things external to your relationship that are going on with your customer's business. Being able to pull that up in 30 seconds before your call and have that preparation, realistically more than 30 seconds before the call, but
Mm-hmm.
have that ahead of time. Those are things that we've always wanted to have the time and effort to put into and haven't been able to. So, in that sense, there is a lot of benefit and improvement that we can do, but it's also changing the expectations. The expectation is that what's going on with my business before we get on the call, um,
Mm-hmm.
every time now.
Well, it's like the power windows idea, right? Like before, it was like a nice to
Hmm.
have, and then it became standard, and no one ever thought of it. So that, now that your customer
Yeah.
success managers can use AI to summarize your business prior to a call, you expect they've done that very baseline work. And I think this is really interesting to me, Chad, because what you're not talking about necessarily is having customer success managers do less or have fewer of them and have AI replace them. Because I feel like
Right.
a lot of customer success managers act as therapists to their clients. I mean, I have a number of friends who are in the CS role who talk about their personal level relationships with these clients because they see them far more than any salesperson would normally, and sometimes they see
Yeah.
them more than the implementation people because those people are getting the work done at the various lowest level. These guys are talking to the folks whose jobs are on the line, and
Yeah.
that's like a very emotional process. And so if they can know more and be better prepared, it can feel like a more human interaction when AI informs the humans of the cadence that they're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
having. I like that a lot. And I want to turn this back to our audience because you've been hearing a lot about how to set up a practice and put it into the sales cycle. Tell me about when you've interacted with those customer success managers. Has it been early in the sales cycle? Have you found them to contribute value to you as you planned for implementation? If you are a customer success manager, where did you find that things were breaking down, where information was lost, or where you were given the proper latitude to do the job you wanted to, which is deliver value to the customer? We'll leave you for a moment and talk about that as we come with our last section, our thoughts and conclusions for the episode.
But it's just changing. It's just changing. The wind will blow. Oh, oh. But it's just changing. It's just changing. It's just changing. It's just changing. The wind will blow.
And welcome back. Chat, very, very interesting conversation. And I think it's a nice bookend to the conversation that we had with Max a couple of weeks ago. And for those of you who are
Yeah.
still
Mhm.
listening, I will put the link to that in the show notes. I'm pretty sure Max will be happy to get reached out to. Speaking of which, Chat, how can people reach out to you if they think, oh, that guy knows something and I want to talk with him?
Yeah. Honestly, the best way to reach me is just on LinkedIn, Chad
Mm-hmm.
Steven. Find me there. I also have doublewinconsulting.com if you want to check out my website as well. But really, if something here has resonated, if there's a topic around customer success that you want to have a further conversation on, I'm happy to hop on a call. Enjoy having those kind of conversations. So please do reach out, and looking forward to it.
And speaking of reaching out, first and foremost, reaching out, Chad, you was fantastic. I mean, if I had a customer success discipline that I needed to get built up in my organization, you'd be the first one I reach out to, my friend. But that means that our audience should reach out to you as well, and to us. So thank you for everyone who stayed this long in the episode. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you to our guest, Chad. That was amazing. And you can reach out to us at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com. You can go to whatsyourbaseline.com for more information about the What's Your Baseline company. My goodness, it's exciting to talk about. And of course, for this episode in particular, at whatsyourbaseline.com/episode 113, which we're recording right now. So please leave us a like, leave us a share, tell your friends. We'd love to hear more from you as we go through more amazing podcasts and we build up the offering set of our business, What's Your Baseline. You can find more about us on Patreon and Substack, links below. And until then, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
And I'm Chad Steven.
And my name is Roland Volt.
And we will see you in the next one.